In 2023, Apple became the first company in history to be valued at $3 trillion. Not 2 trillion, 3. More than the entire GDP of the United Kingdom. More than Google, Amazon, and Meta combined. But here is the number that actually matters. Apple's brand loyalty rate, 92%. 9 out of 10 Apple customers will choose Apple again, every single time. That's not a product achievement. Samsung makes great phones. Google makes great phones. They all make great phones. This is something else entirely. And I think Apple knows exactly what it is. Over the next 40 minutes, we're going to do something that might make you uncomfortable. We're going to pull apart the psychological architecture that Apple has built, brick by brick, over the last 4 decades. We're going to look at why leaving Apple doesn't feel like switching phones. It feels like losing part of yourself. This story starts not with an iPhone and not with Steve Jobs. It starts with a question that behavioral scientists have been asking for 30 years. Why do people stay loyal to things that aren't necessarily the best option? And Apple, more than any company in history, has turned that question into a business model. In 2006, Apple ran one of the most psychologically sophisticated advertising campaigns in corporate history. Not because it was funny, not because it was clever, but because it did something that had never been done in consumer technology. It didn't sell a product, it sold an identity. The ad didn't say, "Our computer is faster," or "Our operating system is better." It said, "This is the kind of person who uses a Mac. Are you that kind of person?" This wasn't accidental. Apple was constructing something unprecedented in consumer culture, a tribe. And tribes have a very specific psychological property that product features don't. You don't leave your tribe because someone else's tribe has a better spec sheet. In 2011, a team of neuroscientists at the University of Southern California ran an experiment. They put Apple fans inside an MRI machine and showed them images of Apple products. What they found became one of the most cited studies in consumer psychology. The brain regions that lit up weren't the regions associated with desire or reward. They were the regions associated with personal identity and self-expression, the same regions that activate when you think about your own beliefs, your own values, your own sense of self. Apple had somehow fused itself to the psychological concept of self, which creates a problem if you try to leave, because leaving Apple starts to feel, neurologically, like abandoning part of who you are. But Apple didn't stop at identity. They went further. They made identity visible. The green bubble. If you use an iPhone, you know exactly what this means. An Android user, outside the group, a signal visible to everyone in the conversation. What's extraordinary about this isn't the technical reason for the color difference. It's that Apple chose not to fix it. They could have extended iMessage to Android. They chose not to, because the green bubble isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's a social pressure system, quietly humming beneath every group chat in America. And it works. Studies show that social exclusion anxiety around the green bubble is a statistically significant driver of iPhone adoption in teenage demographics. Apple didn't just build a phone, they built social infrastructure, and then they made leaving that infrastructure feel like social exile. Here's a test. List every Apple product and service you currently use: iPhone, MacBook, AirPods, Apple Watch, iCloud storage, Apple TV, iMessage, FaceTime, Photos, Apple Music, Apple Pay. Now try to leave. Not just get an Android, actually leave all of it. Your photos, 10 years of them, locked in iCloud's proprietary format. Your Apple Watch, useless without an iPhone. Your AirPods, degraded without iOS integration. Your iMessage threads, gone. Your handoff, your AirDrop, your universal clipboard, your continuity camera, all gone. This is what economists call a switching cost. And every company creates them to some degree. But Apple is the only company in history to have designed switching costs as a primary product strategy, not as a byproduct, as a deliberate architectural goal. Consider iCloud. Apple gives you 5 gigabytes, free, enough to make you dependent, not enough to survive on. So you upgrade, 50 cents a month, $1, $3. It sounds trivial, but it's not the price that matters, it's the migration cost. When you leave Apple, you don't just cancel a subscription, you have to download years of photos, re-upload them somewhere else, verify nothing is missing, transfer contacts, rebuild calendars, resync everything. It takes days, sometimes weeks, and most people decide it's not worth it, so they stay. Then there's the Apple Watch, possibly the most elegant lock-in device ever designed. It is, by every functional measure, the best smartwatch on the market. It is also completely and entirely and by design useless without an iPhone. Apple Watch requires iOS to set up. It cannot pair with Android. It never will. If you own an Apple Watch and want to switch to Android, you don't just change phones, you throw away a device worth $500. This is not an accident of engineering. Android-compatible smartwatches exist. They are technically not difficult to build. Apple chose this deliberately, strategically, because the Apple Watch isn't just a product, it's a retention mechanism disguised as a wearable. In 1971, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner made a discovery that would go on to shape everything from casino design to social media algorithms. He found that the most addictive reward schedule isn't a guaranteed reward, it's a variable one. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, but you never know when. That uncertainty is what keeps people pulling the lever. Every September, Apple pulls the lever, and the entire world watches. The Apple keynote isn't a product announcement, it's a cultural event engineered to produce anticipation, revelation, and desire in that exact sequence. The leaks that Apple doesn't suppress, the blurry images, the supply chain whispers, they are the warm-up act for the dopamine spike. By the time Tim Cook says, "one more thing," millions of people are already in a neurological state that marketers would pay billions for. Apple's packaging has been studied by industrial designers, neuroscientists, and brand strategists. The speed at which the lid opens, tested obsessively by Apple engineers. The smell of the materials inside, considered. The weight of the box in your hand, deliberate. The unboxing is not packaging, it's a ritual designed to produce a specific emotional state, and it works. Apple Unboxing has over 1 billion YouTube views. People watch other people open Apple products for fun. Apple understood something fundamental about human psychology long before their competitors did. Desire isn't just about having something, it's about wanting it, anticipating it, and the ritual of receiving it. They engineered all three. In 1979, 2 psychologists named Daniel Kahneman and Daniel Conoverse published a paper that would eventually win the Nobel Prize in economics. Their discovery, losses feel approximately twice as painful as equivalent gains feel pleasurable. Losing $20 hurts about twice as much as finding $20 feels good. This is called loss aversion, and Apple has exploited it with surgical precision. When you consider switching from Apple, your brain doesn't run a rational comparison. It runs a loss calculation. You're not asking, what would I gain? You're asking, what would I lose? And Apple has spent 40 years making sure that list is very, very long. There's another force at work here, one that's harder to see because it's invisible. It's called the sunk cost fallacy, and it's the reason you justify your third MacBook even when your second one still works fine. The sunk cost fallacy is the psychological compulsion to continue investing in something because of what you've already spent, even when the rational choice is to stop. Apple users don't just have a brand preference, they have a decade of financial and emotional investment that demands the next product be worth it. And here's the genius of it. The more you spend on Apple, the harder it becomes to admit the alternative might be better. Because if the alternative is better, what does that say about the last $15,000? And then there's status. In 2001, Apple released the iPod with white earbuds. Every other audio device at the time had black cables. The white cable was visible from 30 feet away. Apple made their product a walking advertisement, and users became involuntary brand ambassadors. Decades later, AirPods have become one of the most recognizable status symbols in the world. Not because they sound the best, because wearing them communicates something. And switching to a competitor's earbuds means giving up that signal, which, for many people, is a cost they're not willing to pay.